about polar bears. I noticed their behavior. I've had a few charge where they'd go like this and just run, but once they put their claws down, they mean it. When they put their claws down, they just rip and charge you, or the dogs. But a bluff charge. They don't dig their claws in, they're just like that. My name is John Macks, Muffa Kudlak. I was born in 1965, February. I've been living on and off in Paulatuk going through to residential school in 1969 to I think maybe 1980s or something. Well, the one time I was polar bear hunting in House Point. I had hunting polar bears anyway. I had a spotting scope and I was glancing out for polar bears. Next thing I see 3 coming in. And I didn't know, but we waited for about an hour. Next thing you could see these antlers. There were Banksland caribou, the small ones, and this is in the dead of winter. They came right up to House Point. They're just slow. They're all from the young ice, and I could see them. They had ice all around them on their fur, and I thought about them. And when they're crossing young ice, the ice is so thick. When it starts freezing, and they're gonna have to pound their way like this to and get up onto solid ice where they could walk, and their hoofs are like this, and how they could have that kind of grip to get up. Say, where's the polar bear? It has sharp claws that could stick and grab, and this one's just hoofs. And I don't know how much left in that group, but there was 3 that came to the island from or the mainland from Victoria or Banks Island. So that was something to see, and wow, just to think of its journey from, say, Banks or Paulatuk. That's a couple of 100 miles of open ocean, and they must have had a heck of a time crossing. But yeah, it's just one of those things that you don't expect to see. Like, they're leaving the island, coming to the mainland, and just to see how much they suffered just to cross open leads or young ice. And their coats are different than polar bears. Like the polar bear, it'll just shake it off and dry itself off in the snow. The snow gets the water out of its hide, but caribous don't roll like the polar bears, so it's maybe they have to adapt too, like instead of just keeping their ice, like the water would drain off, but they don't rub like polar bears are. They have different behaviors. There's times when your skidoo breaks down and you have no choice but to walk back to the community, and Sometimes it'll take a day, sometimes it'll be 21 hours, 17 hours to depending on your location. Say, yeah, I've had to walk back a few times because of mechanical problems. Even that when it's drifting, as an example, you can't see nothing, but you could kind of feel the land. You know the land. You travel enough, you know when you're going a different direction, or you kind of feel your way without actually seeing because of the blizzards. And now it's I use a lot of my traditional knowledge to navigate, travel in blizzards, and with the stuff they have now, you can actually make it home without even using what you learn from the past. So I try to hold on to that method, using the stars, landmarks, the wind, because say from Pierce Point to Lassard to here, it changes, the direction changes. Say from east wind at Pierce Point, you get to Lassard Creek, it's kind of southeast, and you get to Paulatuk, it's facing south now. And if you don't use that, like it's about 60, 70 miles away, and between that there's two changes, and if you don't use that, you can be way off course, even though you can't see, because you know you're starting with the east wind at Pierce Point, and you come closer, it shifts to southeast, then to full south when you reach here. So if you use the east wind like that on your head, you'd be maybe out towards Cape Perry, and that's about a 70-mile distance, and that's another 4 hours to make it back to your original destination. So yeah, these sort of things that it's engraved up here, and if somebody didn't know that, they'd find themselves out of course, and if the amount of gas that they have, that could be a problem. I can attest this to my younger brother. I was teaching him like he was my apprentice, and I teach him about this and that, what to expect, what to see, how to feel, because feeling has a lot to do. If you can't see the thickness of the ice because of the snow depth, but you could feel it when you're on it. But when you feel it, oh, you really get because you're in danger situation without even knowing it, because everybody relies on sight. But I know if I'm on young ice and I'm pulling a sled, the weight will tell me, wait, you're on, this is a dangerous part because you can't see the ice coloration. And it's pretty hard. Like I don't really rely on GPS or whatnot, like you just mentioned, but If a young person knows where they're going, they keep their wind in mind. What kind of wind? If you don't have the wind, you can use the snowdrifts. And at night time, you could use the stars if it's clear. So that's three ways, but this is in the dead of winter. If you use that in the summertime, it's the seasons have a lot to do with where you are. What you have to do, if you break down, say, every month there's something different, say 12 months, and we have 4 seasons: fall, winter, summer, spring. So these are the times, different times of the year. Like I'd have a different scenario for someone if it was instead of dead winter to the summertime. And how are you gonna deal with the situation if you're boating or whatnot? So it's really a question of how much they have on their inside their grub box, how much gas they have, and you always pack more than you need uh, because it's better to have something. If you run out, you have to go back to town, and that's extra gas to get that. So you'd make sure you have enough food for yourself and your companions. Uh, Getting fish, caribou, and that for food for traveling, even for daytime. A piece of frozen fish will sustain you for the day while you're out hunting different species. So that helps until you get what you're getting at or what you're harvesting, and after that you can sort of breathe a little bit because right away you're changing your diet from canned to native food, but you still have a char or piece of seal meat just to sustain you until you harvest. So you always have to have extra rather than all just canned food because the canned food doesn't keep your energy level. You're easy to get cold. You feel a little drained, but after you have, say, fish or caribou quack, you have oksok, maktak, it sustains you, it keeps you warm. And a good example is oatmeal and what do you call them, cereal, cornflakes. You see the difference. You could have the cornmeal will stay in your stomach longer. It'll keep you warm, whereas say frosted flakes, you just have that milk and that you eat it. You're not gonna stay warm for not. You're gonna be shivering within an hour. But yeah, it's how you want to be out there. You're gonna be warm, or you're gonna be shivering. Like it's up to you. But what you have for your breakfast, it sustains you till late in the evening before supper time. So that's the kind of energy you need now to keep you alert, keep you warm, and you're not being sluggish and like helpless sort of thing. Like yeah.
Have you ever been afraid out on the land, and if you were, how did you deal with it?
This last summer, I was working as a tour monitor in the river, and we didn't have dogs over there. And this one night, this grizzly bear stands over my tent, and it's a small one. So I holler at it, and mumble at it, and it takes off. And another night later, this bigger grizzly comes in, and he's standing above my tent. And I did the same thing, yeah, yeah, making all kinds of ruckus, and all at once I could see his paws going down and pressing on my tent. And I know he's trying to focus on where I am, like I'm right below it. Like my bed is just below the grizzly there, and he put his weight down on the tent, but he never ripped it or nothing. But his weight, I knew he was focusing, just like a polar bear. Once they're waiting for a seal, they're motionless. They block out everything and just focus on one thing, and that's what this grizzly was doing. He's trying to zoom in on my location, and it's not a good feeling there, especially without a dog. But yeah, usually dogs give us a warning, but uh, yeah, it had to be put down anyway. That grizzly, yeah. Like I've been guiding, outfitting for 14 years, and all I had for a boss was the weather. Even though I was the administrator, I still had the weather as my boss, because I couldn't do nothing until the weather was good. Like I'd have to go out and hunt seals in September. While the seal are fat, they don't sink in September, so I'd get 15, 20 seals before a freeze up, and while it's waiting for freeze up, and the next time I harvest seals is in February, when I'm getting ready for sports hunting. So yeah, it's a process. Then say February to April when I'm done hunting, and June, before the end of June, when the seals are out in the ice, on top of the ice, that's my last time to harvest them. I don't harvest them after June because they sink, because all of that fresh water and ocean water mixing, and the seals are not as fat. So yeah, it's one way of say certain species that I harvest seals September, February, and June. So that gives me July, August, September again. This gives me 3 months to where I get the seals in June. I'll cut them up, bag them, because you don't need much food in the summertime. The dogs do. They mostly need water every day. But yeah, about polar bears, I noticed their behavior. I've had a few charge where they'd go like this and just run, but once they put their claws down, they mean it. When they put their claws down, they just rip and charge you, or the dogs. but a bluff charge. They don't dig their claws in. They're just like that because uh, they're not aggressive. Like they put their claws down, they're gonna. That's traction. But if they go like this, they're just. It's not as fast, but it gives you enough time to. Oh, am I too close? Or that's how uh, we teach our dogs too. I guess is some dogs they go straight for the bear and they get charged and they're hightailing it out of there. But the next time they know they go around the bear instead of straight forward. So they're learning too as how not to do, the mistakes they make. Like it's a funny feeling for them too. Like they're running away like this. The tail is dragging on the ice, and they're not fully on all fours. It's funny, but it's how the animals react to a situation, and this is how the polar bear reacts to a certain situation where it puts his claws down or it decides to leave it like that. Because it doesn't really give a sign unless it's hissing, shaking his head like that, and that usually happens in March, April when they're in the mating with the females, and they get into fights with other males. So a lot of this way. And you don't want to be that close when a polar bear does that, because he's gonna give it to you, or you just.
Gee. Anything else that you would like to add? Any messages to other hunters, other young hunters, maybe that are a bit concerned about, their future out there?
Yeah. I know for polar bear and that, there's not many young harvesters going out for the polar bears, but there's all kinds of with late thaw or early thaw and late freeze up. We try to let the younger hunters know just by word of mouth what to watch for, what kind of obstacles you might run into, or certain situations. If you find yourself in this situation, here's what you could do, and you give them an option. Because if the times are changing and you can't really tell them face to face, but you could just tell them, just like, say if someone decides they're gonna go out in June, so I'd use my memory from June to relate to the person. This is what to watch for, and what to expect, and how to get out of that situation. But it happens so fast, like you don't have reaction time. You don't have time to think, because if you think, you're already too late. So it's more of a reaction, because if you think, say even for 4 seconds, you're already putting yourself at risk because you're thinking, and the easiest way is just get out of it as quick as you can, because at least you have a chance. Like you already know what happened here, so you're not gonna forget. So you're looking for another thing that's ahead of you, and you don't want to go through that, so you kind of veer off that sort of dangerous situation. But other than that, it's just trial and error. You do it once this way. If it doesn't work, maybe I'll try it a different way next time. But as an experienced hunter, you go through these, or I went through the past, and now it's the future, and this is what's gonna happen today. So I'll be telling them the advice I could give them to keep them up, afloat, and breathing. Whereas a long time ago, they didn't have that advantage of thinking ahead or reacting to the situation, because a lot of them, the elders, didn't know how to swim in them days. They were mostly in kayaks. They weren't swimmers like uh, today. Most of the people in town could swim, but that's just for recreation. But if you had to do it out there in the ocean or wherever, uh, like I said, the people long ago, some of them didn't know how to swim, and that's how a lot of elders or harvesters were lost, because of they didn't. It wasn't part of. Say, even now, you use swimming as a recreation. It's not. If I sunk down with my skidoo and I'd be floating, and I could swim, I could break off the young ice if I was in the ocean till I get to a solid ice, like a polar bear would pound, pound, pound until he got traction, until it slowly bows by your weight, and you kind of crawl like a polar bear again, just on the young ice to stay afloat. But yeah, the people a long time ago, they didn't really swim like now. Nowadays, it's a given, but in the past they didn't have that option to keep making noise or for someone to help them. But yeah, if you're alone, you can certainly get yourself out of there. But see, I'm talking about the ocean. I'm not talking about freshwater lakes and that, because that they have both two different characters. The ocean water is elasticy, and the fresh water just cracks and you go down. You don't have that safety of the ocean or the salt water bowing down to your weight until the stress lets you fall through. Like, say, even if you're traveling with a skidoo on young ice, you could travel about this much, as long as you don't bust the first wave, because there's a wave in front of you, you stay behind it. If you go too fast, you're gonna bust that bubble and down you go, but you stay behind that young ice until it reaches solid ice, then it's gonna collapse and lift up. but then you have to grab your throttle to get over that one spot. So it's not the best thing to do, but it'll get you back to solid ice, and that's the last chance you have before you're being drifted out into the ocean. So that's sometimes it happens when you're out there. So what I could give to the youth is, like I say, just depending on the month that they're gonna go out harvesting, that they know beforehand or from the other hunters that this is what you have to look out for, where you're going and whatnot. Say, like I mentioned, the ocean and fresh water, they're both different, and it's you can't just treat one as the other. It's no, you can't do that unless it's the dead of winter, where you're not worried about the thickness or the thinness. Like everybody knows now, it's later and it's earlier. It thaws out earlier, but freezes later. So that's the challenge, to just trying to stay above, keep your head above water, is noticing the changes and trying to maneuver around the changes and let the youngers know if this will work. It might work for some, it might not work for others, but at least they have an option. And last but not least, don't think too long, because the more you think, the more trouble you're going to be in, because it's more of reacting rather than waiting until something happens. Like, there's a big difference from waiting and reacting, and that's what we want, is everybody to live longer and safer, learn by their mistakes, or learn by their observations, and share with others, because you keep it to yourself, nobody's gonna know what's gonna happen, but you tell the other harvesters, then that information is gonna be passed on, because one already experienced it, and if you keep it, nobody's gonna know until it actually happens to them, and you don't want them to be at your same level. Like, you know how scared you get? You forewarn them about that situation, so they'll know, because they could picture it. It's not like you're reading a manual, a piece of paper on how to do this and that, but it's easy to forget. But once you tell them it, they retain that information, they could say, oh yeah, I remember now, and right there they could, it's their decision. Because if you read it on a paper, it's about 50%. You'll forget about it and not apply it. Yeah. Between the early 1980s, I was an apprentice with my grandfather Billy, and a few uncles of mine were. I was brought to the school. I came back and I thought I'd reconnect with the land, so I was an apprentice for maybe about 4 years. Learning how to live off the land, say trapping, polar bear hunting. but I haven't. Like it took me 4 years before I can actually harvest a polar bear because my grandfather's teaching was that he didn't want me to go out and just not return back to the community, so I had to learn all these conditions, say the wind, the thickness of the ice, the currents, especially that if you're out on the ocean, it's really easy to get distracted with what you're doing. So you gotta keep the weather in mind. If the wind changes, different things could happen. Say with the north, east, south, and west winds along this area, or the coastline anyway. Like it varies from Cape Perry to Pierce Point to the Horton Riverside because of the distance. The ice reacts different to the winds, but the currents are still the same. It's still we always have to watch over the east wind. And after that, say 1985, I was involved with a summer student program that was run out of Yellowknife, where they brought 21 students to Devon Island to do an archaeological excavation. About the site was maybe under 10,000 years old, but the history, being a participant in that excavation, it got me interested in the history of the people. So since then, I've been involved with a couple of excavations, and especially in the Mackenzie Delta area. And up in the park, like we're still trying to piece together the puzzle between, say, 450 years ago to connect the people to the coastline. So they found some seal, polar bear knuckles way inland in the park. So that was part of their duck walk. You know, they have a little snack, if you would say. If they're walking in the summertime, they eat it, and it helps them to get to where they're going, so they have enough food overland to make the journey to harvest the caribou. So the history has always been fascinating for me because I know how it is to live on the land, but during that time they didn't have the tools that we have now. There were more bow, arrow, spears, and kakiwaks, like fishing spears and whatnot, all made from the land before the Industrial Revolution came, where you could get steel and whatnot to make living easier, like especially if a sailing ship got beached, they'd take what was necessary for them. The wood would be one, the hardwood, the steel, the nails. So just over time, they started getting used of adapting to these new tools that they didn't have before. Everything else was out on the land, say the rocks from, say, chert, where they'd make arrowheads, even quartzite for spears or arrows, projectile points. So a lot of the stuff they used was from the land, and with the Europeans, the whalers coming in, so that they can't kind of modified their existing tools to make it more easier, I guess, just to how you're gonna harvest an animal to skin, or it's a lot easier than using bone or shale for skinning.
You mentioned that Billy taught you what you knew about hunting.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about that. What might have been one of the more memorable lessons that you learned from him?
The first one right off was when we're out trapping, he'd make a mound, and if it wasn't right, he'd snap the trap. And even, there's a process you're making a white fox or colored fox. There's two different mounds that you have to make. Once it's not necessarily done, like once you do that, you gotta find the right powdered snow to set over the trap. Say if you leave it a week or 10 days, the fox could still snap it, the trap. But if you use more of a sugary snow, the fox will just walk over it because it freezes. It kind of sticks to the steel, and it's not hard where you use a fluffy snow that could just even a crow could get caught in a trap. So a week to 10 days, like there's different methods, but this was how I was taught. If it wasn't to his standards, he'd just use his snow knife and say, do it over again until I got it right. But he had the patience, the time, and being November to March is cold out in the open tundra, but he did have the patience to teach me the right way, and that's how I was taught. You do it once, you do it right, and it's good. You do it like that. He told me that come back in 10 days, you're gonna see a fox walking over your trap with no bait. So that's how he taught me, was to do it once, do it right, and that way it's easier. And I took that in everything that I do. Say if I know if I'm gonna do it wrong, no, I'll take the time to fix it. That way I don't have to waste my time. Say as another person who didn't know how to trap, just let him do what he's supposed to do, but it's gonna be a waste of time because the process is not being followed. So that's what he really instilled in my mind, was how to do it, even though how many times he'd snap my traps. Until I did it right, that's the only time I know now I got it, because he's inspecting my work, and he went like this the last time. No, he's good enough now, so I can be more independent in the future. So that was his teaching to me that carries on inside me with whatever I do. If I'm working on fish, caribou, polar bear, seals, like there's a process to do do these things. And also my grandmother, Bertha, they're both, when they were living, they were both good man, good woman in the Northern Games. Like, they have regional, or across the NWT that time, they'd have Northern Games where experienced hunters and that would compete with each other for a ribbon or whatnot, just to show the visitors how things are done, and they trade ideas. And one of the things my grandmother Bertha told me was always leave a lot of fat in the seal. When you're skinning a seal, that way when you start flushing, the weight of the oil would just follow through instead of just struggling. So if you had a thin seal, it would be harder because the weight ain't there to let it fall. So that's one of the tricks she told me, was keep a lot of fat on the seal, so it just falls off when you're flushing them. And with polar bears too, but it's not for Northern Games. Like polar bears, you always wanted a lot of fat on the hide, so the same process, the weight just, it helps with the flushing. And that's with an ulu too.
Wow, not even an ikun. You
No.
didn't need one, you just
No.
needed your ulu.
Yeah.
Huh. I know you've spent your life exploring our land and sea. Talk a little bit about a time where you got into, a sticky situation, you had to use what you learned to get yourself out.
Say in the mid-90s, we're out fishing in the Hornaday River, but more towards fish camp. And this is in June. There was about 10 skidoos and sleds all fishing in the coast for char when the cracks open. And we were waiting for the river to bust. At one area, you could see the water flow, and that didn't happen because of at that time we didn't know it. The river channel moved to another section on the Hornaday, the mud plains. So the river changed its channel, and we were waiting for this sign to say it's time to go, but with the flow changing, we couldn't see that. And my uncle Moses, he told us it's time to go, and I said, why? That river is not, you can't see it busting, it's not flowing. Because we're always using that as a sign of when to leave. And while we were getting out of there, my Uncle Mo sunk his skidoo, and he was in the crack. We got him out of there. We got his skidoo out, drained it. And next thing, I was the one that had to lead the crew back to Paulatuk. And like I said, we didn't see the river open from this side, so we had to go a lot further out. And between the Hornaday and Rock River, the flow, it kind of meets together. And right close to there, that's where we barely got out of that thing because the cracks are open, muddy. you can't see the potholes unless you feel it, because the fresh water is eating the ocean ice and making potholes, and the river busts. It's really muddy, like the Mackenzie River, so to speak. So all the silt is, you can't tell if it's a hole or just dirty, muddy water. But you could only feel it when you go in through a pothole like that, and if you're going slow enough or too slow, you can sink your skidoo just because you can't see the dangers, but you know it's muddy from the river system. And yeah, it took us, it usually takes us about 4 hours to come back at that time, but that day it took us over 18 hours. Because some of us had to go across to Bennett Point to because you can't cross the cracks; they're so wide. So go over the land and go back in the ocean, and you're on this side of the crack now, so you could make your way home. Some of these cracks are maybe 20, 25 feet wide, 16 feet minimum. So you can't just drive over the cracks because of your sled and the load. So that really changed our traveling, because they were taught what to do in that area, that location, when to leave, but you don't get a sign because of the river change its flow. There's no flow there, and there's no sign, so we're thinking it's safe. We're okay for a few more days, but it's hard to understand. But over time, they see it now, and they're used to it because the flow of the Hornaday changed. So that it really stuck in my head, because you could trust something that you're used to out in the land. Okay, that's the time to leave, and you don't have that, and you're still there while it's getting more dangerous on the other side. So you can't see, but you know when it's time to leave, because you're using your traditional knowledge to say, okay, it's time to go. And with the river changing, you can't use that as a sign.
Yeah, I was really interested in like you mentioned, the flow changed. Can you
Yeah.
explain that a bit more? How does that happen with the Hornaday?
I'm not sure how that happened. Might have been just the ice buildup. Like usually it goes this way, and now it goes straight out from Paulatuk. It doesn't go by the old channel. Like there's more deep, deep channels in Paulatuk. Then the main flow is right by the land side on the beach to the Hornaday. And now the flow is more to the center of the whole area. And you can see it when you're flying over. It's just a deep channel. And whereas I worked as a char monitor last year, there was not much flow to where we usually had our netting in the early 60s, 70s.
And so, wow, this is a big change. I would imagine.
Yeah.
Do you view, like when the flow changes like that from what was there for many years, what do you think, that the future of that river is like? Do you think that that might be the reason why we haven't seen as much char since the salmon came?
I'm not too sure with the relationship between char and salmon, but now you can't really use that old fish camp because the terrain around the area, it's low, not even 25 feet high, and you can't see the distance of where where the river where the river flows. It's more like 5-8 kilometers away, and you can't really see where when it's busting. When it busts, it opens, it tumbles the ice and just eats away at the bottom. And now nobody really fishes in fish camp anymore due to that, because there's no warning system where you could use your traditional knowledge, but now it's not working because you can't just rely on it because the flow has changed, and that's what everybody use when they go fishing in June, is the flow, and when you're supposed to get out of there. Without that, we would have to wait till maybe June, July, when the water recedes to get back to Paulatuk. But if not, they would have to use a chopper to fly the fishermen back to the community, and like we'd be self-sufficient for at least 10 days to 2 weeks with the gas and whatnot, but with the food we would have stayed there till then, but you wouldn't have enough gas and whatnot to sure, you can use the driftwood and that for heat for cooking, but it's a real choppy situation. Like I say, you can be prepared for a week to 10 days, but now with everything changing, you gotta have, say, maybe enough food for a month, just in case you get stranded. And that's just one example in June of how the changes have how things have changed during our harvest time in June, just for fishing. The elders like to fish in June because they're not as fat, they're more lean. They don't have the fat along here as, say, in August, where their bodies are really plump with their food. Yeah. There's an overwintering hole we call Inuvialuit. It's just across Paulatuk here. In August, the char, they come up, they go up the Hornaday, up to where they spawn. Some of the mature char, they spawn there and then they go back down to this deep hole. That's where they overwinter. Instead of them staying up in the river, because sometimes the water changes the depth. Say fall time, if it's late, you'll get more slush in the ice, whereas usually the ice is just clear to the bottom. And now with more slush in there, you can't set your net because of the slush. So that's another thing we have to contend with, this more slush in the river system, and the slush it freezes a lot quicker than just fresh water. So that might have a reason why some of them sometimes it freezes to the bottom.
That can't be good for the char, eh? When they're.
No.
Can you explain to us how?
Well, you get this much slush in under the ice, and that'll freeze a lot quicker than just being water. So
So
even
essentially, that would stop them from going to certain areas that they're
yeah,
accustomed to going.
yeah.
And or kill them.
Yeah, or even for setting a net, you cannot set a net even if you use a jigger. The slush just stops the jigger from going, so you gotta go to a different location or find the clear ice where there's no slush. So
And that's hard.
yeah, and taking the time, like years before you could just go up and set your net. Now you gotta spend more time, more gas just trying to find a good location to put your net in. So that's another thing, like you could only have your limited daylight, say now, and after that, if you don't find a good spot, you come back home and try again tomorrow, and eventually you'll find one. But like I say, it's taking more time to do these things, whereas in the past they just go over there with dog teams, chisel a hole, set the net, and come back. But yeah, now these are little impediments that kind of stops you, slows you down from accomplishing your daily goal. Say even for setting a net or whatnot, it's questionable. You can't just say, yeah, I'm going to go and set a net right now, and no, you come back, you go, oh, well, maybe tomorrow, so you're not as jolly as as your first day going out. So, yeah.
This is really interesting because it's almost like, are we going to have to change our diet for a while? If we're not getting enough char,
Yeah.
then what are we going to go and get in return for that?
I know we have a lot of lakes in our area where we don't get char, but we get lake trout, humpback whitefish, or across the ocean there's a smaller Cisco lake with really a lot of fat in those fish. But yeah, it's people are having to change their diets, like they're used to char, and now you have to supplement it with other fish like trout, lake whitefish, lake herring. I know the hornady has been fished for many years, and still we get char coming out in June, going back up the river in August. So I don't know how long, but just to offset the pressure like I said, we have inland lakes where we could fish, and another area too is Brock Lakes. That's a good area for fishing too. And they go up the Rock River up to the Hornaday Lakes, and it's a good area for fishing. For for me, being out in the ocean, like you mentioned, I'd have to wait till the ice is thick enough and safe enough to travel on to go out, say, even to the island where I have a base camp. I'd have to wait a little longer to get out there because of the thickness of the ice. Like it's taking a longer to freeze up, like even in this bay. Say in the 1980s, I would have been driving across it, whereas there was still water before November 1st. And that's when the trapping season starts. And now, if I was trapping, I'd have to wait another month wait till the weather gets cold for the fox to become prime, where they get fluffy and they have their winter coats. Say right now they're not as they're kind of thin yet. They're not fluffy because of the lateness of this fall season. So yeah, it's even the animals are being affected because if it's cold, poof, they puff up right now, and just to maintain their heat. And now they're not prime because it's taking longer for them to get their winter coat.
So the quality of our furs are compromised as well.
Yeah, by the late freeze up. So yeah, if like I said, if I was trapping November 1st, I'd get one that it will still have its summer camouflage or coat where it's just thin. They don't have the thickness to puff up for the cold. Yeah, so the animals are sort of having it easier, but I could only say easier because it's warmer for them, huh? And I know.
And we're more likely not to hunt them right until they're prime.
Yeah, because if you do that right on November 1st, you send them off to the fur auction, the price would be below what you're expecting because they're not fully primed like this wolverine.
Wow, thank you so much.